Do you have any specifics on who is really doing this? I mean, do we have any names of people?
Oh yeah, the corporations that are patenting genes are almost all pharmaceutical companies and some research institutes and universities. Among the largest owners of the human genome now is a corporation by the name of Insight, which has a couple thousand gene patents. Some of the more profitable ones are owned by a company called Myriad. Now, Myriad Corporation Myriad Genetics owns the BRCA1 and 2 genes, which have been found to be related to a propensity to get breast and ovarian cancer. Now, their patents cover the genes themselves, various mutations on those genes, and all of the proteins associated with those genes. Now, what this allows them to do right now, and what is the largest source of revenue for them right now out of this patent, is to monopolize the testing that goes on in the United States and now elsewhere for the testing, for the presence of this gene. So if you, for instance, if you have a family history of breast and ovarian cancer, it can be very helpful to get a test for the presence of the BRCA1 and 2 gene, because then you can know whether in fact you have a likelihood of getting breast or ovarian cancer, or both. Mm. If you know you have this gene, there are specific recommended treatments. But because of the monopoly that Myriad has on this gene and on the testing for it, the cost of these tests in the United States and now elsewhere throughout the world are around 3,000 United States dollars. Now the amount of labor and the actual cost of doing the test is about $400. So that's an incredible markup. And in places like the United States where there's no health insurance to cover, well, there's no mandatory health insurance, and a lot of people go without, it's prohibitive, and they just simply can't get the test. Part of my book is focused on genes themselves, but I have a sort of overarching concept that I'm interested in seeing explored more. It hasn't been discussed much. We talk about something called the commons. Now, the commons is a term that lawyers have used for a while to describe things that are commonly owned, okay? And the notion of the commons is an ancient legal concept going back to when the sovereign set aside a portion of land for people who were called commoners. People who would use the commons because they had nothing else, maybe to graze their small flock of sheep or to grow some vegetables, etc. Well, I mean, that's a nice idea, right? So if somebody can enclose and actually possess a space, for them to give up a certain part of their land or their goods for the use of others is a nice charitable sort of thing to do. And that's great. But there's another sort of commons which I've argued exists, and that is something that cannot logically be possessed to the exclusion of others. And land doesn't count as one of those commons, and at least as I see it. Because land I can possess, for instance, where I'm sitting now, I can possess to the exclusion of others, just logically. And you know, we could test that right now, but I'm pretty sure we would come to the same conclusion. I'm excluding you by my presence. But there are certain things about the world, and this is a sort of heretical notion, there are certain things about the world that simply cannot be owned. All right, these are what I call commons by necessity. And I think we need to think hard about what sorts of things might belong to the commons by necessity. And I argued the genome is one of them. Things like the genome are commonly possessed by all of us all at once. So when we talk about the human genome, we're talking about an object that exists in you and me and everybody else in the world all at once. And it's constantly evolving, it's constantly changing, it's not a static thing. And it's not the product of our intention. It's a part of an evolutionary process that's been going on for billions of years among us and other creatures. And to think that somebody could somehow properly claim a portion of that thing to the exclusion of others is, I think, insane.
Absolutely.
And so I argue this is one of those things that simply cannot be enclosed. It can't be owned. It is what I call a commons by necessity, and there's other sorts of things that qualify too. And
like, for example, what else qualifies as commons by necessity?
well, I would argue, let's take an example. All of the oxygen in the atmosphere. Okay? To think that somebody might just physically be able to exclusively control that would be also similarly ridiculous. It's not logically feasible, and it's not practically possible. And moreover, it would kill us if we allowed anybody to do that.
Yeah.
But there's other things. So laws of nature are the best example, I think. The rules of mathematics, okay? So the fact that 2 + 2 = 4, right? And if we're going to take an example from Orwell, you can't logically consider it being any other way. The universe is such that 2 + 2 will always equal 4. This is not a human invention. This is a rule of the universe. And nobody can enclose that to the exclusion of others. And I argue that genes are the same sort of thing. These are expressions of, not of human intention, but of some grand overarching universal principle which cannot be exclusively held by anyone. So imagine, and then this is actually one of my major concerns, is that the patent attorney, all of these patent attorneys that are making a lot of money by filing patents are looking to ever expand their realm of potential business. And I've heard patent attorneys argue that rules of nature or laws of nature could properly be patented. And they argue that, because, well, for instance, in the U.S. Patent Act, it says inventions and discoveries. If they're novel, non-obvious, and useful, should be patentable. But to extend it to something over which there is no inventive phenomenon, where humans had nothing to do with it, I think takes the notion of patent way too far and offends my concept of this commons by necessity. If we allowed somebody to patent calculus or mathematics or the periodic table of elements, we would be denying everybody a right to something that is commonly ours.